Okay, it's great to be with you again today. I am so excited to talk with you about this concept of a softened startup and how softening your approach to communication and relationships will really help take your relationship to the next level. So stay tuned. All right, so this concept of a soft startup, what does that mean? When you hear the phrase soft startup or softening your startup, what does that mean in your relationship with your spouse? This term got a lot of focus through Dr. Julie and John Gottman, who are world-renowned marriage researchers. They use this term in the Gottman method to couples counseling. And what this term means, softened startup or soft startup, all it means is just this idea that when you can approach communication with your partner in a softened way, it heightens the likelihood that that communication goes well, right? The communication can be effective. And communication being effective is extremely important to relationships because communication is the number one culprit when it comes to relationships breaking down and couples having conflict in their relationship. So this concept of softening your startup can enhance the communication in your relationship with your spouse and give your relationship even better chances for success. So let's break it down. What does it mean to soften your approach, to soften the startup to your communication? But what we're really focused on is taking a look at the very beginning of your communication with your spouse. When you are initiating a conversation, and especially when you're initiating a tough conversation, a vulnerable conversation, a conversation that's going to be a little bit difficult to find your way through, like communicating about problems in the relationship. But really, when you think about any time you're communicating in your relationship with your spouse, a softened startup is a really good idea. So what it means then, if we kind of define a softened startup, it just means that when you come into the communication with your spouse, your goal is to present the information in a way that gives it the best chance for making it into the mind and the heart of your partner, right? So your goal is to increase understanding through this communication, and you're softening your startup in order to give it the best chance for successful delivery to your partner, right? So we're going to the very beginning of your communication, the startup of the communication, right? And we want that to be soft. So there's a few things that you can do when initiating this communication that can give your communication the best chance for success. And I'd like to review those principles with you right now. So the first principle is this idea of considering your lens. Now, if you haven't reviewed the Remember module of the Renew System for Couples, that proprietary model that I've put together, take a look at the Remember module and the Advanced Communication module. Both of these modules really focus on this concept of derived versus inherent lens. And to give you kind of a brief summary of what I mean by that is when you consider your lens, you want to make sure that you're operating through the inherent lens. The inherent lens just means that I believe that I'm lovable, that my partner's lovable, and that they love me too. I love them and they love me. It's staying in that lens, right? We are two people who care about each other and love each other, and I'm trying to give that the benefit of the doubt. That when we fight or we have conflicts or we misunderstand each other, that there's a different explanation for why that misunderstanding is happening, instead of just coming to the conclusion that they must not care, they must not love me, they must not respect me. We jump to those conclusions way too often in marriage. Sometimes that's the issue. Rarely is it the issue, right? So considering your lens means that you're trying to hold on to that inherent lens, that inherent view, that inherently I'm loved, they're loved, and that we love each other, right? And I'm coming to communicate with that person that I care about. I'm coming to communicate with that person that I love. I'm not coming to communicate to my enemy, because our strategy changes when we're communicating with an enemy. See, when we're communicating with an enemy and I start up the conversation, I'm coming in hard, right? Not soft. I'm coming in heavy, right? I'm coming in with criticisms. I'm coming in with attacks. I'm coming in with defenses. And all of those things are things that we're trying to avoid in a healthy, functional communication interaction, right? We want to soften that startup. And the best way to do that, step one, is to remember to operate through that inherent lens, that lens that believes in your lovability and their lovability, and you're coming to communicate with your favorite person, your best friend, your lover, right? Like that's the person that you're talking to, not an enemy. So that's step number one. consider your lens. Okay, step number 2. Now that we've kind of decided which lens we want to operate through, that inherent lens, the one that believes in love, right? Then step number 2 is we want to stay focused in that lens, right? Why am I coming to communicate with this person? It's because I love them, I care about them, and there's something between us that I want to resolve, right? I want to increase understanding. My goal is that I can communicate with them in a way that they will understand me. And we want to stay focused on that goal, right? So that's step number 2. I'm not coming because I'm looking for a fight. I'm not coming to debate. I'm not coming to criticize or put them down or point out hypocrisies. That is not my goal. My goal is to increase understanding. Stay focused on that. Because it's easy to fall into some of those critical and defensive communication styles that just aren't helpful to what we're doing. Okay, and this brings us to step 3. So now that we're considering our lens and we're staying focused on the goal at hand, right, which is to increase understanding, step 3 is to be mindful of my approach. So this is to be mindful of the words that I'm using, right? Like I want to be mindful of how I'm communicating. Am I criticizing my partner, right? Or am I using connective communication with my partner? So I want to use connective communication style. And a connective communication style sounds something along the lines of, hey, do you have a minute that we can talk? I really wanted to go over with you something that I'm experiencing in the relationship that's becoming very difficult for me, right? That's different than words that might sound more critical, like, hey, do you have a minute? Because I'm really having an issue with you, right? When I come in that way, I'm alerting my spouse to become defensive, right? Because you're about to get attacked. But if I come in with this softened startup and that connective communication, I'm sending a message to them much more like, I want to resolve a problem and I see both of us as a solution, right? So words matter. Another thing to consider is my tone. Right? You can tell your partner a lot depending on the tone that you use. And it's why we start with making sure that we're in the right lens, right? That I'm seeing myself and our relationship in the right way and that I'm staying focused on that. Because when it comes to being mindful about my tone's going to be affected a lot by what's going on in my mind right now as I communicate with my partner. If I'm seeing them as an enemy, right, like my tone will sound more brutal and harsh and pointed. And if I'm communicating with one of my favorite people, it's going to sound a little bit lighter. It's going to sound a little bit more hopeful. It's going to sound a little bit more connective. So if I'm inviting them to have a conversation with me and I'm in a tone that doesn't work well, that tone may sound like, I'm not sure what's going on with you right now, but can we talk about it? Because I'm having an issue. You can tell in my tone, right, that it's sharp, it's a little harsh. It's different than if I use a tone that's a lot more focused on my goal, which is to increase understanding. That tone may sound something along the lines of, hey, can we talk just for a minute? I'm just kind of struggling with a thing and I would really love to work through it with you. Right? Like that tone's a lot more inviting. It's a lot more softer. It feels a little bit more like I'm bidding for connection versus like I'm coming in for an attack. A third area I want to be mindful about is my behavior, right? Because your behavior can send big messages, those nonverbal messages that your words aren't talking about, right? So if I come in and I've got my hands on my hips and I'm just like, hey, we really need to talk, right? Like that body posture sends a message to them that doesn't sound friendly. It doesn't encourage their defenses to be down. It encourages their defenses to come up. And you'll remember that defensiveness is the number one issue when it comes to seeking understanding between two people. When there's a defensive wall up, there's no understanding that happens, right? So our goal is to have that defensiveness down. So watch your posture. A different posture that you could come in is hands to your side, right? Like looking in a relaxed stance. And talking with them maybe a little bit with your hand. Small gestures like this, right? I'd really love to talk with you. Do you have just a minute that we could talk through some things that I'm dealing with, right? That makes a big difference, the way that I'm standing, the posture that I take, right? Remember, this is your friend. This is your favorite person. This is not your enemy. We're staying focused on that. We're being mindful about that, right? And because we're staying focused on that and being mindful about that, we want to be careful about what kind of posture we're using. A final principle in this be mindful category is my timing. Be mindful of my timing. Is the timing for this conversation good, right? In general, if it's really late at night, not a good time. If neither one of you have eaten recently, not a good time, right? If there's a lot of chaos going on in the background, not a good time, right? Those can make timing very difficult. I want to try to find time where the environment feels a little bit more relaxed. There isn't so much pressure on the agenda right now. Maybe they're scrolling on their phone, I'm scrolling on my phone. That could be good timing, right? Like to be able to have a conversation with them. Timing just increases the likelihood that they're going to be open to hearing what you have to share. So considering timing and being mindful of the timing can be helpful. Okay, so a next principle then is to discern defensiveness, right? So as I start to interact with them, I want to watch for signs that defensiveness is increasing with them. Because like we talk about a lot, defensiveness is the brutal enemy of communication and understanding, right? When two people are trying to share information with each other, a defensive wall prevents that communication from happening. And our goal with a softened startup, right, softening your approach in the communication, our goal is to decrease the probability of defensiveness. You can't control if your partner gets defensive or not. We talk about that in the video, How to Deal with a Defensive Partner. If you haven't seen that video yet, check it out. Because we talk about, right, you can't control that defensiveness in another person, but you can manage your approach. And by managing your approach, you can decrease the probability of them becoming defensive. And that's where we want to be focused. So some signs that your partner is getting defensive, the first one is that they may withdraw. Right? You might see them kind of shutting down and withdrawing in the interaction. You can tell that because they're not making eye contact. They'll start looking at the floor. They'll start looking out of the room. Right? They may even start to just drift off or walk away from you. Those are signs that they're shutting down, that they're withdrawing. And that can be a major sign of defensiveness. Another sign of defensiveness is they may become critical or argumentative with you, right? They might be trying to debate with you when you're having a conversation with them, or start criticizing the things that you're saying and defending themselves while you're trying to explain the experience that you're having. They might also start emotionally escalating. So emotional escalation just means their emotions are starting to get bigger and bigger, right? So you can see anger increasing in them, or you can see depression, right? Like sadness and hurt, kind of feeling self-loathing increasing in them. They might even say things like, I know I'm just the worst, okay? Right? In a defensive, kind of depressed way. Or they might say, really, you want to come after me? How about let's talk about what you do, right? In a really critical way. So those emotions building, especially anger emotions, hurt emotions, those emotions can be a tremendous sign that defensiveness is increasing. And the reason we want to watch for defensiveness, to be discerning of it in the interaction, is because if you start to notice signs of defensiveness increasing in your partner, we want to take a step back. Like lots of time, people instead try to figure out how to break through that defensive wall. But breaking through the defensive wall just increases the likelihood they're going to become more defensive, right? So our goal is to kind of take a step back in the interaction and reevaluate some of the previous steps before going further, right? So to take a step back and evaluate, okay, am I still holding them in this I love you lens, right? Do I have them in that inherent lens, considering the lens? Am I staying focused on the goal, right? The goal is to increase understanding. The goal isn't to fight. The goal isn't to have a critical debate, right? Am I staying focused on that? Am I being mindful of my tone, my posture, my behavior, my timing? Am I focused on those things and being aware of those things? Those are all things that I want to be mindful of because they increase the probability that my partner's defenses will stay down, right? They increase the likelihood that I can create some understanding in the conversation. Which brings us to the final principle, which is to adjust, right? So if I recognize that my partner is starting to become defensive, make a few adjustments. You might be able to make those adjustments right there in the communication, right? By starting with something along the lines of, I'm sorry, I feel like I approached this wrong. Let me try again, right? Like, I love you and I care about you. There's something that I want to share that's kind of tough for me. And I'm not doing it because I want to blame you. I'm not doing it because I want to attack you. I'm doing my best to try to talk with you about it simply because I want to figure out how to get it out from between us. I care about you. I want to feel close to you. I believe you care about me too. So can we talk about this for a minute? Can I try again? Right? You can try to make an adjustment like that in the interaction, or you may need to give yourself a little bit of time and give them a little bit of time to kind of calm down and get refocused, especially if you've seen their emotions spike in a really defensive and kind of aggressive way, it's a good sign to take a step back and reevaluate, readjust. Or if you notice your emotions going from 0 to 100, right, to take a step back and to try to get centered again in that lens and in the focus and the mindfulness that you need to really try to give this communication the best chance for success. So that's the last principle, is to adjust. And it's okay, right? You can come back and try again in an hour. You can come back and try again tomorrow, right? In the morning, right? If you're trying late at night, you can come back and try again. It's okay. We can try 100 more times, right? We want to make those adjustments based on the things that you felt like you did well or things that you feel like you didn't do so well, and then come in and try it again. Now, once in a while, you're dealing with an individual who is extremely toxic. Most relationships aren't that way, but sometimes there is just an extremely toxic individual in the relationship that you've come and you've tried this type of strategy 10 or 15 or 20 times, and it's just not delivering. And in fact, maybe they even start to get verbally or emotionally abusive with you, right? Belittling you, putting you down, making fun of you, dismissing you harshly, right? Even physically attacking those communication interactions you're trying to have. If those dynamics are going on, I definitely wouldn't continue to try to practice these principles. That typically means that there's a bigger issue in the relationship and maybe a bigger mental health issue going on with your partner, that continuing to try this strategy is probably not going to be effective, right? Now, if you've tried this several times and you're just not being successful, seek out some professional help, right? A lot of times, all that means is that we have enough history with each other that there's so many sensitivities in the relationship that we both just have a really hard time staying out of defensiveness and communicating well the thing that I'm trying to share with my partner. And that's common. That's okay. There's lots of couples all around the world that just don't quite have the skills developed yet to really share in a way that increases understanding and to listen in a way that increases understanding. And it could just be that there's enough sensitivities in your relationship that you're both really struggling to do that. And that's why we're here. That's why Renew exists. That's why marriage counselors and relationship coaches around the world exist, right? So if you find that you're having a tough time communicating in a way that's effective, seek professional help. And even if your partner won't, seek it out for yourself, right? You may find some tools and strategies that you can use to adjust in a way that really helps you get through to your partner. Or you may discover that you're in one of those relationships that's just toxic enough that your partner may never be in a position to respect you adequately or to seek understanding in a manner that they should. I hope that's not the case. That's not usually the case. Usually the issue isn't that we're with a really terrible person, but they do exist in the world. Most of the time, it's just that we don't have these skills refined well enough to seek understanding and to listen without defensiveness. And a professional can help you with that effort. So if we can help you with that, we're here. We'd love to assist. I hope this has been helpful for you as you think about your communications. Practice softening your approach, right? Use a soft startup. Use these principles of considering your lens, staying focused, being mindful, discerning for that defensiveness, and making adjustments as you work to have more success in your communication with your partner. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I look forward to being with you again soon. Take care.